I've been in there sometimes toward the last, when she was too feeble to cook, and carried her some blancmange, or custard, something I thought she might relish, and she'd thank me, and when I asked her how she was, say she felt better than she did yesterday, and asked me if I didn't think she looked better. Dreadful pitiful. And say poor Luella had an awful time taking care of her and doing the work. She wasn't strong enough to do anything, when all the time Luella wasn't lifting her finger, and poor Lily didn't get any care except what the neighbours gave her, and Luella eat up everything that was carried in for Lily. I had it real straight that she did. Luella used to just sit and cry and do nothing. She did act real fond of Lily, and she pined away considerable too. There were those that thought she'd go into a decline herself. But after Lily died her aunt, Abby Mixter, came, and then Luella picked up and grew as fat and rosy as ever. But poor Aunt Abby began to droop just the way Lily had, and I guess somebody wrote to her married daughter, Mrs. Sam Abbott, who lived in Bar, for she wrote her mother that she must leave right away and come and make her a visit, but Aunt Abby wouldn't go. I can see her now. She was a real good-looking woman, tall and large, with a big, square face, and a high forehead that looked of itself kind of benevolent and good. She just tended out on Luella as if she had been a baby, and when her married daughter sent for her she wouldn't stir 1 inch. She'd always thought a lot of her daughter, too, but she said Luella needed her, and her married daughter didn't. Her daughter kept writing and writing, but it didn't do any good. Finally she came, and when she saw how bad her mother looked, she broke down and cried, and all but went on her knees to have her come away. She spoke her mind out to Luella, too. She told her that she'd killed her husband and everybody that had anything to do with her, and she'd thank her to leave her mother alone. Luella went into hysterics, and Aunt Abby was so frightened that she called me after her daughter went. Mrs. Sam Abbott, she went away fairly crying out loud in the buggy. The neighbours heard her, and well she might, for she never saw her mother again alive. I went in that night when Aunt Abby called for me, standing in the door with her little green checked shawl over her head. I can see her now. Do come over here, Miss Anderson, she sung out, kind of gasping for breath. I didn't stop for anything. I put over as fast as I could, and when I got there, there was Luella, laughing and crying all together, and Aunt Abby trying to hush her. And all the time she herself was white as a sheet, and shaking so she could hardly stand. For the land's sakes, Mrs. Mixter, says I, you look worse than she does. You ain't fit to be up out of your bed. Oh, there ain't anything the matter with me, says she. Then she went on talking to Luella. There, don't, poor little lamb, says she. Aunt Abby is here. She ain't going away and leave you. Don't, poor little lamb. Do leave her with me, Mrs. Mixter, and you get back to bed, says I. For Aunt Abby had been laying down considerable lately, though somehow she contrived to do the work. I'm well enough, says she. Don't you think she had better have the doctor, Miss Anderson? The doctor, says I. I think you had better have the doctor. I think you need him much worse than some folks I could mention. And I looked right straight at Luella Miller, laughing and crying, and going on as if she was the centre of all creation. All the time she was acting so, seemed as if she was too sick to sense anything. She was keeping a sharp lookout as to how we took it out of the corner of one eye. I see her. You could never cheat me about Luella Miller. Finally I got real mad, and I ran home, and I got a bottle of valerian I had, and I poured some boiling hot water on a handful of catnip, and I mixed up that catnip tea with most half a wine-glass of valerian, and I went with it over to Luella's. I marched right up to Luella, a-holding out of that cup, all smoking. Now, says I, Luella Miller, you swallow this. What is it? What is it? Oh, what is it? She sort of screeches out. Then she goes off a-laughing enough to kill. Poor lamb, poor little lamb, says Aunt Abby, standing over her, all kind of tottery, and trying to bathe her head with camphor. You swallow this right down, says I, and I didn't waste any ceremony. I just took hold of Luella Miller's chin, and I tipped her head back, and I caught her mouth open with laughing, and I clapped that cup to her lips, and I fairly hollered at her, "Swaller, swaller, swaller," and she gulped it right down. She had to, and I guess it did her good. Anyhow, she stopped crying and laughing, and let me put her to bed, and she went to sleep like a baby inside of half an hour. That was more than poor Aunt Abby did. She lay awake all that night, and I stayed with her, though she tried not to have me, said she wasn't sick enough for watchers. But I stayed, and I made some good cornmeal gruel, and I fed her a teaspoon every little while all night long. It seemed to me as if she was just dying from being all wore out. In the morning, as soon as it was light, I run over to the Bisbees and sent Johnny Bisbee for the doctor. I told him to tell the doctor to hurry, and he come pretty quick. Poor Aunt Abby didn't seem to know much of anything when he got there. You could hardly tell she breathed, she was so used up. When the doctor had gone, Luella came into the room looking like a baby in her ruffled nightgown. I can see her now. Her eyes were as blue and her face all pink and white like a blossom, and she looked at Aunt Abby in the bed sort of innocent and surprised. "Why," says she, "Aunt Abby ain't got up yet." "No, she ain't," says I, pretty short. "I thought I didn't smell the coffee," says Luella. "Coffee!" says I guess if you have coffee this morning, you'll make it yourself." "I never made the coffee in all my life," says she, dreadful astonished. "Erastus always made the coffee as long as he lived, and then Lily she made it, and then Aunt Abby made it. I don't believe I can make the coffee, Miss Anderson." "You can make it or go without, just as you please," says I. "Ain't Aunt Abby going to get up?" says she. "I guess she won't get up," says I, sick as she is. I was getting madder and madder. There was something about that little pink and white thing standing there and talking about coffee, when she had killed so many better folks than she was, and had just killed another, that made me feel most as if I wished somebody would up and kill her before she had a chance to do any more harm. "Is Aunt Abby sick?" says Luella, as if she was sort of aggrieved and injured. "Yes," says I, "she's sick, and she's going to die, and then you'll be left alone, and you'll have to do for yourself and wait on yourself, or do without things." I don't know but I was sort of hard, but it was the truth, and if I was any harder than Luella Miller had been, I'll give up. I ain't never been sorry that I said it. Well, Luella, she up and had hysterics again at that, and I just let her have them. All I did was to bundle her into the room on the other side of the entry where Aunt Abby couldn't hear her, if she wasn't past it. I don't know but she was, and set her down hard in a chair, and told her not to come back into the other room. And she minded. She had her hysterics in there till she got tired. When she found out that nobody was coming to coddle her and do for her, she stopped. At least, I suppose she did. I had all I could do with poor Aunt Abby trying to keep the breath of life in her. The doctor had told me that she was dreadful low, and give me some very strong medicine to give to her in drops real often, and told me real particular about the nourishment. Well, I did as he told me real faithful till she wasn't able to swallow any longer. Then I had her daughter sent for. I had begun to realise that she wouldn't last any time at all. I hadn't realised it before, though I spoke to Luella the way I did. The doctor he came, and Mrs. Sam Abbott, but when she got there it was too late, her mother was dead. Aunt Abby's daughter just give one look at her mother layin' there, then she turned sort of sharp and sudden and looked at me. "Where is she?" says she, and I knew she meant Luella. "She's out in the kitchen," says I. "She's too nervous to see folks die. She's afraid it will make her sick." The doctor, he speaks up then. He was a young man. Old Dr. Park had died the year before, and this was a young fellow just out of college. "Mrs. Miller is not strong," says he, kind of severe, "and she is quite right in not agitating herself. You are another young man, she's got her pretty claw on you," thinks I, but I didn't say anything to him. I just said over to Mrs. Sam Abbott that Luella was in the kitchen, and Mrs. Sam Abbott she went out there, and I went too, and I never heard anything like the way she talked to Luella Miller. I felt pretty hard to Luella myself, but this was more than I ever would have dared to say. Luella, she was too scared to go into hysterics. She just flopped. She seemed to just shrink away to nothing in that kitchen chair, with Mrs. Sam Abbott standing over her and talking and telling her the truth. I guess